Okay, so today we have Rich McClellan here, who is the founder and owner of Middle Tennessee's #1 custom shop. He does all of the cars for all the stars and the athletes and the who's who of Nashville. And he also happens to be my husband. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, babe.
You can relax. It's not going to be scary, I promise. A little bit painful, but not scary. So what I want to do first, because you are the world's worst about bragging. You never brag about yourself. You never talk about the people that you've worked on their cars. Now, we all know that you've worked on Jelly and Bunnies. However, there is a long list of athletes and artists and et cetera, et cetera. Can you just take a minute and name some of the notable people that you've worked for?
I've been doing this for 25 years, so I've been lucky enough to have the opportunity to work on quite a few people's cars. So, I mean, we've worked on everybody from Keith Urban to Luke Bryan, Michael Orr, Michael Griffin, Pekka Rinne, Mike Fisher, Roman Yossi, just so many different athletes and celebrities, and we've met movie stars, and we've met soap opera stars, believe it or not. And so it's been really, really interesting. And some of the people that love their cars you'd never expect.
Wait, who was that guy that we had in here? It was a Tesla, and he was like the lead singer of a boy band.
I don't remember his name. I know you're talking about.
Yeah. Was that like One Direction or no, it wasn't One Direction.
No, it was something on Nickelodeon or something on Disney
Do you
Channel.
Remember?
Big Time Rush.
Big Time Rush. That's it. That's right. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. So who would you say has been your favorite outside of Jay to work on their cars?
Believe it or not, most of them are really, really cool and really down to earth, especially if you treat them normal, like an everyday person, which we do. We try really, really, really hard to treat them very normal. Madison Cawthorn, which is a U.S. representative for North Carolina, or used to be anyways. He's really cool. Became a good friend. We actually went and hung out with him for New Year's Eve a couple years ago. So he's been really cool. I've known Kevin Byard since he was a rookie with the Titans, and he's always been really cool. I've known him for years and years. Me and Michael Griffin were always really good friends. I used to pick him up from the airport and drop him off at the airport, to travel. And I'd take his cars and go work on them.
So you've really become buddies with a lot of these people. And how do you think that's happened? It's not just because you work on their cars, because the guys at Jiffy Lube work on their cars too. So what do you think it is about you that they are just drawn to, that they feel comfortable with?
Honestly, I don't. I really don't know. But I try to treat them like normal people. I don't try to treat them like they're somebody special or celebrities or whatever. I talk to them like they're regular guys, just like I'm talking to my buddies, and I treat them that way. I think that's the difference, is because I don't give them any special treatment or kiss their ass or anything like that. I'm cool with them, and because I'm cool with them, they're cool with me, and they trust me and respect me, and, all of that. I'm just like them. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. I didn't grow up with money. I grew up in the hood, and I didn't grow up with a whole lot, but I built something out of myself just like they did.
Yeah.
So I think,
and we're definitely going to touch on that today, because your story is actually one of my absolute favorite stories. You literally, when I tell people about...
I might be a little biased about that.
Well, maybe a little bit, but that's one of the reasons why I fell in love with you and your family, because you guys really do have like the quintessential American Cinderella story. And it's really inspiring and really encouraging to people to realize that you, for sure, absolutely can make something of yourself. It's all mindset. So we're going to get to that. So why don't you tell me, or tell all of our listeners, the 3 listeners that we'll have, you weren't born and raised here. You didn't grow up here.
No.
Where were you born? Tell me about your early days.
I was born in San Bernardino, California, which is actually a pretty famous to a lot of people. It was, I was born in Loma Linda Hospital, which is Loma Linda Hospital is the place where they did the first baboon heart transplant. So I was actually born in the same hospital.
That explains a lot.
I was born in the same hospital, and I actually played with the little girl. Her brother was the one that had a transplant. I played with her in the waiting room, according to my mom. I don't know.
Right.
But that's what she says. I was in there and played with the little girl. But so I was born in San Bernardino, which is near Fontana. That's where my mom and family are pretty much from. And I lived there till I was about 8 or 9-ish. And then we moved to Las Vegas, lived in Las Vegas for about 4 or 5 years. And then we moved here in 95, 96. I think it was December of 95. And been here ever since.
So you moved from California and to Las Vegas at what age?
About 8 or 9.
Okay. And then you stayed there until you were about 13?
About 13, yeah.
And so tell me about the time and influence in Vegas, because that's really the bulk of your childhood that you can remember, 0 through 5. That's kind of core, growing up. But so a lot of your memories were from Vegas.
Yeah, I have a lot of memories still from California, things we did. My grandfather was a huge influence in my life, and he always had nice cars. He always had Cadillacs and nice pickup trucks, and his cars were always pristine. They always were pristine. They had campers and things like that, motorhomes that they traveled in. House was always pristine. So it was always like a big thing for me, his respect and approval and admiration was huge to me. It was a huge deal. So I kind of followed that. Now, he wasn't a car guy per se. He would tell my grandmother, she'd say, "Wow, it looks like my tire's low." He'd go, "Yep, it's almost 5 o'clock. You better take it down and get it fixed." Because he didn't work on cars. That wasn't his job. That wasn't his thing. And so he paid other people to work on his cars. So the fact that I became somebody that worked on cars was kind of strange.
Yeah, you speak really highly of your grandfather and always have. The influence that he had on your life is pretty cool. Now, he also didn't have what you would consider a boring life. Your granddad had a really crazy story, but during your lifetime, why don't you talk about kind of what he did for work and the stories he would tell you, because that's a really big influence to the type of person that you've become today.
Yeah. So when I grew up, it was, to me, it was normal, but to everybody else, it's strange. It's weird. But when I grew up, my uncle Jay, which was my grandmother's brother, always had this little apartment, which isn't out of the ordinary, right? And so we'd go to this apartment, and there would be 3 or 4 phones on this desk. There was always this one room that had a desk in it, had 3 or 4 phones, had those weird banana looking things on the back one where you can stick it on your shoulder.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it had, believe it or not, back then, this is in the late 80s, 90s, they had caller ID. And they had this, I'll never forget it, it's like this orange light. So the phone wouldn't ring, this light would light up and flash instead of it ringing. And that's how you knew a phone call was coming in, because he'd be on the other line taking a bet. And they were bookies in California. And in California, back then, I maybe not now anymore, but back then it was illegal to be a bookie. And so my grandfather, every Tuesday morning, the new betting line came out in Las Vegas. He'd fly from California to Las Vegas and call back the betting line.
Every Tuesday.
Every single Tuesday. And so now these are all stories that I hear from my mom and my grandmother, but as my mom growing up as a child, she's like, I remember, my teen years counting $200,000-$300,000, in cash, because all they dealt with was cash. It was only a cash business.
Yeah.
So I'd play at that apartment all the time. I was always there at that apartment. Phones were ringing all the time. I'd have to be quiet when he was on the phone. And then I remember they had a big screen TV, huge, big screen TV, and there was just TV stacked up all the way around it, and they'd watch every single horse race, boxing match, NASCAR, football game, baseball game, it didn't matter.
Anything you could bet on.
Anything you bet on, they had it on TV. And the main game, the big whatever it was that they had the most on, was on the big TV. And so that's what I grew up with. That was normal to me. And I would ride with my grandfather. He'd pick me up on Saturdays. He'd take me to go to breakfast, but we would stop at a bar or two, and he'd be like, okay, Richie, sit here. I'm going to run in real quick. And he'd run in and then come back out and have an envelope, and he'd stick it under his leg, and we'd go to breakfast.
My gosh.
And he would go and collect money. And that's the thing. He would hand out money that they won, and then he'd collect his money in envelopes and stuff.
Yeah.
But this was all in California. But even when we moved here to Tennessee, I still periodically went with him. I can remember where they're at. One was in Hermitage, one was in Mount Juliet. And there was these car lots that these guys would still bet with my grandfather's old ex-business partner. They'd bet with him in California. And my grandfather would have to go pick up the money for him, and he'd get cut off of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was one time we went and picked up a car as a payment.
So this makes so much sense. You growing up in California and Vegas and being exposed to all this. And then you were also raised by a single mom.
Largely, yes. She was single until, my dad wasn't in the picture. My dad was in prison before I was born. He was locked up before I was born. I didn't know who my dad was until I was about 15. I learned who he was, and I talked to him a couple times on the phone. He was still in the penitentiary. And then I didn't meet him until I was 21 in the penitentiary. I didn't go to the penitentiary, but I visited there. We happened to be in Long Beach, California, and I had to put in all these paperwork and stuff and to visit him. And I met him for the first time in the penitentiary.
Now, I absolutely love your dad. He's such a sweet person.
He's out now.
Yeah. Right. He's out now. And I met him soon after we got together. So the stories you tell are kind of hard to equate him to being that person, but do you feel comfortable telling who he is and why he is?
I don't mind talking about. I don't know a ton about him. I know only the things he's told me and what my mom has told me, and which is not a ton. I don't know a ton about him.
No, you guys have done great about just picking up and moving forward and not really dwelling on the past. But I want to just, if you feel comfortable saying what you found out about him when you met him in the pen and his life and why your mom kept you guys kind of away from each other.
Well, the biggest thing is when my son was born, when Richie was born, I wanted him, whoever wanted to be a part of his life and love him, I wanted that. I wanted him to have whoever was available to love him and show him love. And my dad was there. He couldn't be there for me, which is fine. That's okay. That happens sometimes. And it probably was for the best, because back then when I was young or being born, he was real high up in a biker club called the Vagos. And he still is loosely involved with them as far as I know. He's a nomad, president nomad, but he was always involved in that club, and that club got him in trouble several times, and he would go to prison and then get out for a little bit and then get tied back up for association with other brothers or whatever. And it just was a recycling, he just kept recycling the same thing over and over and over my whole life. Yeah. And that's why I never met him. That's why my mom, he wasn't on my birth certificate. That's why my mom never brought me around him or anything like that. Because
he's a really good soul. He just made some hard decisions in life, and we can't judge that because we don't know,
we don't
the decisions he had to make. However, I will say this, your mom did such an incredible job protecting you and raising you the best she could, given the circumstances. And you guys have moved forward together with your relationship, you and your dad, in such a beautiful way. And I think that's really inspiring.
My mom never held any grudge either.
Never.
She said, "Hey, if you want to meet him, okay, I'll put you in contact with him. And yeah, and he even came down for Richie's first birthday.
Yeah.
And he came to Tennessee and visited with his wife, his current wife. And there was nothing. It was like, oh, hey, nothing. Now, my grandmother, on the other hand, she was like, what is he doing here? He doesn't belong here.
She can hold a grudge like no other. But Richie and Linda, if you're listening, we love you and we miss you so much. They are such and we'll talk about that at a later date, but them as a couple tickles me. They're so funny. But going back to your mom as a single mom, can you talk about when you did eventually move from Vegas to Tennessee, and that's kind of when this story for you starts. Can you talk a little bit about that journey?
Moving here? Mm-hmm.
Because during that time, you had two little sisters. Your mom had two girls. So now by this time, you have two little sisters, Elaine and Lindsay, and you guys have relocated back out to Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so...
Which is where your granddad's from, originally.
Yeah, he's from Dixon, or it's called White Bluff. It's a little bitty. It's right outside of Dixon. But he was from here and always wanted to move back here. And then a couple of years before we moved out here, they did move back here. And they traveled for most of my life, and then decided that my grandfather couldn't travel anymore. He had diabetes and stuff, and so he couldn't haul the RV anymore. So they bought a house, and they said, hey, look, we want you guys to relocate back here, and we'll move you out. We'll move you out of Vegas and move you to here.
Because things weren't great at this point.
No,
in Vegas.
My mom and stepdad, my sister's dad, they were they owned a business. They were a painting company, and they were doing okay. I mean, we weren't neglected or anything like that. Like, we always had everything we need. But my mom was on what was called methadone. It's like a synthetic heroin. And, when she was younger, she kind of got mixed up with the wrong people and kind of got, mixed up with the drug scene. And always was a great mom. She was always there for me. She always played catch with me. She took me to my baseball games, and she always supported me. She always had a job. She actually worked for the state of California and the mental health hospitals. And so I never knew anything other.
Yeah.
And then when they decided to move to Tennessee. We all moved to Tennessee. We relocated to Tennessee. My grandparents came down and loaded up U-Haul, and we drove back. And my grandparents owned a bunch of property all around Tennessee. And so they put us in one of their apartment complexes. Mm-hmm. So we lived there for a year, and my mom was sick for about a year.
Because she was detoxing.
Yeah. She quit cold turkey. Did it all by herself, which is, from my understanding, super hard.
Yeah.
So
and dangerous.
Yeah. So she was just really sick.
Yeah.
And she laid around a lot, and finally she got over it, and she got herself out of it. And then we moved out of those apartments, got a house, and
she bought her first house?
No.
After moving here?
No. She didn't buy her first house just a few years ago.
But after moving.
Yeah. But years later. But yeah, they rented a house, and we moved into that house. And about a year after we moved into that house, I ended up throwing my stepdad out.
Oh yeah.
My stepdad out. That was my sister's dad. He was very verbally abusive, even in Las Vegas. He was an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. I'll say that first. He was an alcoholic, and he just was so verbally abusive. I never saw physical abuse, but the one time that he would scare my sister so much, and she was little. She's 3-4 years old. She scared her so much she'd pee on herself, and because they would yell so much. And so one time I was about 15, and at this point I was pretty big. I was a big boy, and he wasn't that big. He's maybe 5'9" and maybe 150 pounds, 160 pounds. By this time I'm much larger than him, about 180 pounds. I'm about 5'10", about the same height as him, but I'm larger than him.
Yeah.
And they were in a fight, and I went to go get my sister. It was in a hallway, And I went to go get my sister to put him in the room like I usually did. And he like raised his hand at my mom, and I stepped in front and I said, "You're not going to do that." And he pretty much said, "What are you going to do?" And I grabbed his arm, spun him around. I picked him up by his belt and by the back of his shirt and threw him out of the door. And it was through a storm door. Mm-hmm. And the top half was glass. I threw him through the top half, which busted out the glass, and it cut his head open. And I threw him over the front porch, like in one toss. Like threw him through the plate of glass over the front porch. So he called Metro PD on me. Metro PD came down, and they said, "What's going on?" Told them what happened. And they go, "How old are you?" I said, "I'm 15. And they looked at him and they said, "If I were you, I'd move out because we can't do nothing to him." And he was protecting his mom. So if I were you, I'd leave. So he moved. He ended up packing up a couple of days later, moved back to California, and we didn't see him again for years.
Wow.
I was probably 18. So they have three or so years.
All right. So I just have to preface this next section of the podcast by saying this is all allegedly. This is not an admission of guilt. This is just storytelling, wink, wink. So, okay. You guys, you're here. Your mom's clean. Your stepdad's out. So she's truly single mom in this thing with 3 kids. Now, you've told me some stories about a, quote, misspent youth. So tell me the story about what you sold in school.
Well, I mean, I sold everything. I sold any and everything I could.
You were a little hustler. Your granddad really taught you.
I carried a backpack full of like chips and Cokes, and that's when tapes were still big, cassette tapes, but CDs were just coming on the scene, but they were too expensive for most of us to buy. So I would get a little money up and I would go and buy like the hottest CD out. And then I would buy a pack of recordable tapes. And so then I would dub the CD onto the tapes and I'd sell the tapes. So that paid for my CDs. And I would do the dirty versions, because back then they had the dirty version and the clean version.
Yeah.
And I would do the dirty version. That's what everybody wanted. And so I made money that way. I sold chips. I sold, candy, games, not games. I did take bets on some games. Not to my grandfather's level, but I did. And then I sold drinks and all kinds of stuff. I sold everything.
You also stole some dirty magazines from your stepdad or something.
That was in 7th grade. That's not allegedly. That really happened.
Yeah, and you like clip the pictures out?
Yeah, I cut out wallet-sized photos of, it was a Penthouse magazine, and that was the dirtiest one of them all. Playboy didn't have shit on Penthouse. And so I cut out wallet-sized photos, and I would sell them to kids at school. And one kid got caught with them and told on me, so I got in trouble. My mom had to come down. And back then, paddling was a thing. So I got paddled in the principal's office by my mom.
Yeah.
And then we got in the car, and then she starts laughing about it. Like, she was like, "I cannot believe," because they called her and said, "Hey, your son got caught with paraphernalia." And so she immediately went to drugs.
And freaked out, I'm sure.
She did. She flipped out. And then by the time we got in the car,
she was so relieved it was just porn.
So I got in trouble for that. And then I got escorted out of 8th grade. I got escorted out of 8th grade because my backpack started smoking.
What?
Yeah. So I was always into electronics. And so I had a remote control car. And I took the battery pack, your rechargeable battery pack, and my Walkman kept dying. And I would run the wire up my shirt, and so I could listen to my earbud while we're doing tests and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And my Walkman kept dying, and batteries are expensive. And so I'd recharge that when I soldered it in. Well, one of the solders broke and touched the other side, and so it started smoking in my backpack while we were taking a test.
Oh, no.
And the teacher had to grab my backpack, and we ran outside and like dumped it out, and I had to like undo it. And she was like, "What the hell is going on?" And it smelled terrible. Like sulfur.
Yeah.
And so I explained it, and she was like, "Oh man." So I didn't get in trouble for that necessarily.
Yeah. And you would take your friends like PlayStations and stuff, or it wasn't PlayStation.
That was when I was a kid. That was in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
I'd take their Nintendos apart and Segas apart, and I'd fix the controllers and
clean them and put them all back together. Yep. I mean, this is just so on brand for you. Yep. You really have been the same person all these years.
Remote control cars, I'd change the frequencies in them so one controller can run 2 control cars at the same time.
Yeah. And you figured all of this out as a kid.
Yeah.
That is so crazy. I
took shit apart when I was like 9, 10 years old, 11 years old.
Yeah.
And I was the guy. If your Nintendo broke, I was the guy. I fixed it. So I was always the guy.
Yeah.
I was always the guy. And my grandfather used to tell me, he was like, you got to always know somebody. If you know people, you're good.
You have literally beat that into my head since I met you. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Who you know. And I always have a guy. I got a guy. Oh, yep. I got a guy for that.
I know someone.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's either that or I know how to do it myself.
That's literally become a way of life for us.
That's right.
You know somebody, and it's the most obscure people in the most craziest of places. You've always, everybody you know I've known them for 20 years.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And you never like the couple of people that I'm real good friends with, like you wouldn't put us together and go, there's no way. Like, there's no way. They're completely different people.
Absolutely.
We're great friends. Like me and Lil Man, stuff like that.
We literally cannot go anywhere without being stopped by somebody. It's, Richie, ain't seen you in years. How you been, man? Like, literally, everyone.
Hell, I just went to Detroit and met somebody in the Detroit airport.
Yeah.
They were like, dude, where you been at? Like, we're headed back to Nashville. I ran into your friend. Remember Aaron on the plane? Yeah,
absolutely. You just know everybody. All right. So now you're in high school. We're going to move into kind of like the era right around the time you were kicked out of school.
Well, yeah. So the reason I was expelled from school was...
Now, where did you go to school?
I went to Hunter's Lane.
Shout out Hunter's Lane.
Big
mistake. Huge.
I went to Hunter's Lane. It was a big school. It's one of the biggest schools in Middle Tennessee.
It is massive.
A lot of kids there. Yeah, there's like, I think at the time it was like 3,000 students or something like that. It was a lot of students, maybe 3,200 students. And so I actually ended up my sophomore year, getting into a relationship with a teacher, with my biology teacher.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You got into a relationship with your teacher.
Relationship. Yeah, it wasn't a relationship, but
it was a situationship. You're literally living every teen boy's dream. You're fucking the teacher.
She was beautiful too. She was.
Oh, really?
As a teen, yeah, absolutely. But she was real young. She was like 21.
Like fresh out of college, first teaching job, yeah. And you had just swept her off her feet as a 17-year-old.
I doubt that. I wasn't 17.
You were 16?
16, yeah.
Holy crap.
I was a sophomore. And so
this is like a lifetime movie.
I wasn't driving yet. And that's how she'd take me home from football practice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so
anyways, I ended up getting a master key to the building.
That you boosted from your lover.
Put it like that. But so I ended up getting a master key to the building. And I went to Lowe's. I had it, or Home Depot, or whichever one of the hardware stores, and had them cut. Well, they're not supposed to cut them. Apparently, there's some kind of marking on there that's not made for copy. Like, you're not supposed to copy them. Well, I knew a buddy that worked there.
Knew a guy.
So I had like 5 or 6 of them copied. Well, once I had one copied, I could copy them as many times as I wanted, no matter what.
Yeah.
Right? Because I just got rid of the original key.
Right.
Or actually, I put the original key back on the key ring. So now I had copies, master key. And it would open the teachers' bathrooms. It would open the auditorium. It would open the locker rooms. It would open anything. I mean, just about anything. There was a couple things that wouldn't open here and there, but I could open the offices. I can open everything. And in our school, we had, there was 5 offices. There was 4 or 5 principals. I think there was 4 principals and then 1 main principal. So there's 5 total principals. There was 1 for each grade in high school.
See, I'd never heard of having multiple principals until I was here and had kids in school. My high school, it's a county school.
Yeah.
Like, there's a high school, middle school for the whole county. All the other schools would be like charter and private, and they're super duper small.
Right.
So you're going from Hunter's Lane, which is just for like Madison area.
Yeah.
We had a whole school for the entire county.
Well, remember I just took you by that. There was Hunter's Lane, and then 3 miles down the road, 4 miles down the road is White Creek.
Yeah.
And it's like right there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they're not very far from each other.
Right.
You know? And then Stratford is only maybe another 10 miles away.
So you're really figuring out your way in this. So you make these keys, and you're selling them to other students for a profit.
So I'd make copies of them, and I'd be like, hey, these are master keys. You can get in anything. And they're like, oh, cool. And so I'd sell them for like $100 a piece.
Yeah.
And so I was making money off of that. Well, of course, somebody fucking got caught and snitched on me. So they pulled me out of class. And actually that day, just probably 30, 45 minutes prior to that, I had went down. And I always played baseball. I played football, played baseball. And you have to try out every year, no matter what. And so I had, this is my junior year now. So I had already made money selling these keys for almost a year. And so, of course, they got caught with it. They told on me. Just shortly before that, I had went down to check the final cut list of the baseball team. I just made the baseball team again for the third year. And so...
But by this point, you didn't have possession of the key anymore.
No, I didn't need it anymore. I knew enough people with the key. If I needed it for anything, I just get it. Right?
Yeah, but they were after you. Like, they had their sights set on you.
So they came and pulled me out of class and were like, well, they didn't tell me who it was. I found out later who it was. But like a year later, I found out who it was. But they pulled me out of class and they said, I need to search your locker. Sure. Let's search my locker. Nothing's in there. One of the teachers that I had known, he was a basketball coach, but me and him were cool. Like, I knew him. I wasn't a good student, but I was an okay student. I wasn't a bad kid. Like, I didn't get in trouble like that.
Yeah.
But they knew I did things, right? Yeah. But they never could catch me and I wasn't disrespectful either.
You were always in the morally gray area, but you really never did anything that truly harmed anyone.
And they all knew who I was. And so he did. And he knew I had a car because he controlled the car passes.
Yeah.
And so he was like, well, he's got a car. And so they searched my car. So they got into my car. Well, just a few days prior to that, somebody owed me money. And I met him outside of school somewhere. I just ran into him. And he gave me this 7-inch buck knife for partial payment. And I just threw it in my glove box, locked the glove box, and never thought about it again. Well, it was still in the glove box locked. So when they searched my car, the glove box was locked. Me not knowing much, first they weren't allowed to search my car. Even on school grounds, they weren't allowed to, but I let them because I didn't know no better. Second, when the glove box was locked, they asked me to unlock it, and I did. I shouldn't have. So I unlocked the glove box. There's the knife. Well, they also found another knife in the trunk, but it was just like a little pocket knife, like nothing. It was super dull. I used it to strip wires with.
But this was the first year of the
zero
tolerance. Meanwhile, in my high school, the boys would come to school with like the rifles in the
Ours
back.
Did too.
Yeah, because they were going hunt. They would leave school early to go hunt.
Ours did too. They'd be hung as long as they were hung in the back window. Yeah, that was legal.
Yeah,
and you were going hunting after school.
Yeah,
like you were still allowed to do that.
So you go from that to you have a small knife in your and so they were also after you because they knew.
And I didn't have it on my person. And they had also caught me doing other things prior. Like I set off 2 dry ice bombs in one of the hallways, and another student. I was always friendly with all the students. Yeah, cool kids, alternative kids. It didn't matter. Like I was friendly with all of them. I didn't discriminate like that. And one of the kids was really cool. Not a lot of people talked to him. He had a real small group of friends, but people would mess with him and make fun of him. I never did. I didn't do that. I just wasn't that guy. Yeah. And so we were in class one day. We had a substitute teacher, and the class was power mechanics, and they built the homecoming floats in the back shop of that. Mm-hmm. Well, when you had a substitute in that class, you weren't allowed in the shop. Well, I had a master key. So I was able to get into the shop, right? So I went into the back of the shop and I took some Coke bottles and I put a little bit of dry ice in the bottom, put some water in it, and set them up with the cap loosely on them, set them side by side. About 20 minutes go by and it's boom, boom. And it set off these 2 dry ice bombs in the shop. So it echoed, and it echoed all the way down the hallway. And
So
teachers
what was the
come
point
on.
of this? To get out of class early?
It's just funny. It's funny because it was a substitute. It was funny.
Oh,
It was a
gotcha.
prank, and teachers came hauling ass. I mean, 4 or 5 of them come running in. What's going on? It sounded like a bomb got set off.
Yeah.
And they were like, "Who did this?" And nobody said anything. And this kid stood up and he was like, "I did it," and he got expelled. He got expelled for it. And I saw him a few days later outside of school. I was like, "Man, why'd you do it? You didn't do that. I did that." And he goes, "You were always nice to me. I didn't care." And he was like, "But you were always real cool with me, so I just took the heat for you. I didn't want to be there anyways."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay." So that led to that. So they knew, and I was in that classroom. They knew I had done things, and they just never could catch me.
Yeah.
And that was their excuse. But they arrested me, took me downtown.
Yeah.
And even was it SRO
Yeah.
officer. Me and him were cool. This is nice. It was this black dude, and me and him were always cut up and laughed, and he was a really cool dude. And even when he was cuffing me, he was like, "I'm so sorry." He was like, "I don't want to do this, but like I have to. It's my job."
Yeah.
And my mom came and got me. She was pissed, not necessarily at me per se.
Yeah.
She was mad at the situation,
For
like
sure.
what they did to me, and treating me like that. Like I didn't deserve that.
Yeah.
I wasn't out causing a ruckus. I didn't threaten anybody. They pulled me out of class. And so, yeah, I got expelled for a year.
Yeah.
And it was probably a month before prom. I had already paid for everything for prom. Was supposed to go in this limo with all my friends and everything, and didn't get to go. They wouldn't let me go to prom.
I'll take you to a prom.
Oh,
we'll get dressed up. We'll go to dinner. We'll do the whole thing.
So I never got to go to any of my proms because I got expelled my junior year. And so I ended up going to I didn't go to an alternative school. I went to a church school.
Yeah, like a little private school.
Ironically. But yeah, I ended up going to this church school. And then 2-3 months before I was supposed to graduate through this school, it shut down.
Yeah.
So I never got to graduate. So I went to building prisons.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck it.
Okay, so let's talk about you building prisons, because you went from building a jail to being put in jail. And this is kind of where your life did a complete 180. Like, you weren't necessarily a quote unquote bad child. You just were kind of mischievous and into everything. And so I
didn't like being broke.
Right. True.
My family,
you figured it out.
My grandparents weren't broke, but my mom was broke, you know, and most of the people I grew up with were broke.
Yeah.
Nobody had anything. So in high school, I broke into cars and I stole stereos and stole wheels and stole tires. And I stole all that shit. And I'm actually in the industry now because of that, because I learned how to install the stuff and made more money installing it than I did just selling the product. So
you would steal it and then sell it and then be paid for installing it. And so tell me about the day you and a friend were out at the mall, correct? The day you got caught.
So we were driving. We went somewhere, and I picked him up, and we were driving through Madison. And this is back when airsoft guns came out, right? So these airsoft guns come out, and they looked super real back then. They didn't have orange tips. They didn't have nothing. It looked legit. Mm-hmm. And we had bought them while we were building prisons. We had bought them just to play with each other. We shot each other with them and shit like that. We were still kids, kind of.
Yeah. No, you were. You were 18, right?
Yeah, we were 18. And my buddy was 19, the one I traveled with.
Yeah.
He's passed away now. But he, so we had bought these, and I had it in my car, and it was sitting there, and he grabbed it and was playing with it in the passenger seat. And apparently an unmarked vice cop drove by us and saw it through my car because the windows are down. It was summertime. Saw it, followed us, called it in. And we were in front of Rivergate Mall at the food court. And just, usually when you went to the mall, you creeped by just to see who was out there, And a bunch of cops ran up, guns drawn on us, and pulled us out of the car and threw us on the ground.
And this would have not been an issue because of it being an airsoft gun. However, It's what else they found in your car.
Right. So they pull us out, They realize it's an airsoft gun. However, they found a bulletproof vest in the trunk of my car, and so they pulled it out, and the even the airsoft and a bulletproof vest could be considered intent to robbery.
Oh.
And so I was like, look, that's not what I'm doing. So they searched me again, like my person, and I had a wad of cash on me. I had like $800 or $900.
And that was legit.
That was legit. I had just cashed my check, just got back in town that day.
Yeah.
And I made a lot of money building prisons. And so I even told him, I said, my check stub's in the glove box. And he's like, why do you have it all in cash? I was like, because I like to get cash, and I had it mostly in 20s. I was like, it's hard to cash. It's hard to break $100 bill. You know, when I take it to buy stuff, they don't like breaking $100 bills that often. So I just get it in 20s.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, okay. Like, he didn't really believe me. That was the honest God's truth. And so they say, okay. And cops talking to me, acting like he was like, look, you need to take this shit home and don't bring it out. The bulletproof vest by itself is not illegal.
Yeah.
The airsoft's not illegal.
But together, it just doesn't look great.
Doesn't look great. Right. And so he's like, look, and there was another cop, and he goes, search the car one more time. They search it one more time, and there was a little cup. And I remember I work on cars, so I took stuff apart. And so there was a little cup thing, and there was a cup sitting in it. And he picked it up and set it back down. When he did, he hit it like at an angle. I watched him do it. Hit it at an angle, and the thing popped off. And when it popped off, there was a bag of cocaine and some weed underneath it.
Because you had been selling at this point on
Correct.
the side.
Correct. And so they pull it out, and they say, put the cuffs on him. And they put
now,
the
did
cuffs
your
on him.
mom know that you had been selling? She was probably so disappointed.
Yeah, she was. I mean, she knew that I kind of broke into cars, but she never could prove it. And she would just tell me, look, be careful, because she wasn't going to stop me. I was 18.
Right.
And
you had been moved out of her house for a couple of years.
Yeah, I was living with my cousin.
Yeah.
And the guy my buddy that was with me, he was 17. I had just turned 18 a few months prior.
Yeah.
And it was in May, I think, and I turned 18 in February. And I said, look, that's not his. It's mine. All of it's mine. So they let him go and let his dad come get him. And they arrested me, took me downtown. And I got a bulletproof vest. They charged me the gun charge, but they threw it out because I got it thrown out. Cocaine with intent to sell, weed with intent to sell, and contributing to a minor.
Mm-hmm.
And so
you were poised to really do some at this point.
Oh yeah, big time. Especially with a narcotic and stuff like that. Big time. Now, I was still doing prisons, ironically. And so I spent the night in jail, and my mom came and got me the next day, bailed me out.
Mm-hmm.
And she bailed me out, and we went to the bail bondsman or whatever.
And your grandmother, I just have to throw this in there. Your grandmother is seriously, I understand myself. Your grandmother told your mom, leave him in there.
Yeah. Well, apparently I just found out that my mom wanted to leave me in there too. I just found that out.
Oh, really?
At Thanksgiving. So anyways, she does come and get me out. She bonds me out. And my bond was like $50,000 or whatever. So the bond was like $5,000 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So we get on the bail bondsman. I give him all my information, right? And I say, hey, look, I travel. Every week I'm gone in the state. And he goes, okay, you just need to call me when you get back in state before you leave and when you come back. Okay, no problem.
But you said in the beginning, they closed those doors and you couldn't get out. Like when they rolled the door closed and you heard it shut, you said, what?
Yeah, it sucked. It was, when they put me in jail, and I had been in cells 100 times. I built prisons, right? Yeah. But I always had the key.
Yeah.
And it was never locked. And so when those doors shut home and I couldn't open it, I was like, this is fucking real. Like, I don't want to be here. And the guys were cool that I was locked up with. There was 4 of us in a fucking little bitty cell with 2 beds. They were cool as shit.
There were 4 guys with 2 beds?
Yep.
What, they want you to snuggle it out?
I slept on the floor.
Wow.
Yeah. These are holding cells. They're not like jail cells.
Yeah.
You don't go to jail until you get put in an orange suit.
Gotcha.
You don't go to jail. You go across the CJC. But So yeah, I'm in this holding cell with these guys. Cool as shit. Like that wasn't scary or anything. Like I had been in those atmospheres before, but when that door closed and I couldn't open it, that got real for me.
Yeah.
I didn't want to. I'd been in that position one other time after that, and I know for a fact I don't want to be in that position.
Yeah. And we're going to touch real briefly on Holly and the birth of Richie. I am actually going to have Holly on the podcast. I'm so excited. And that's a whole story in itself. But you got with Holly, you guys ended up getting pregnant with twins and got married. And shortly after that, she lost the babies.
Before
the wedding.
Yeah.
She lost the babies.
Yeah. We had found out she was pregnant, and so I asked her to marry me and started getting, your life situated.
And you guys were so young.
Yeah, we're 18.
Yeah.
18.
Babies.
Both 18, yeah. Because we're only like 16 days apart.
Yeah.
We're not very far apart.
Yeah.
So found out she's pregnant. I proposed, and we get our own place, which I worked hard for. The place across the street, and the guy did not want to rent to us. He was an old guy, and he was like, I don't rent to young people. I've been screwed over too many times. I said, listen, I understand. I did fire and water restoration at this time now.
Yeah, you went full legit, totally straight.
Yeah, I got out of building prisons and stuff and started working for Surf Pro, and so I was well versed in that.
Mm-hmm.
Well versed in that. My mom had always been in that industry, still is.
Yeah.
So he had one of his trailers catch fire, and I said, "Listen, it was real minor." I said, "Listen, I know how to do all that. That's what I do for a living." I said, "I'll remodel that bathroom that caught fire. I'll fix everything, put it all back together so you can rent it out. But you rent me this other one." And he goes, "Okay, you do that for me, and I'll rent it to you." I said, "Great." So I did. I remodeled it. He rented me the trailer, and I said, "Look, it needs some upgrades in it." I was like, "If you buy the materials, I'll do the work for free." I did. I redid all the flooring in the whole place and changed.
So you were working the angles just to benefit you, but more in an upstanding way. So you've never really lost that.
Oh no,
that part of you.
That doesn't go away. That's something that, in my opinion, that's something that's it's not taught. It's just in you.
It's always
you hustle,
you
you hustle no matter what.
Yeah.
No matter if it's legal or illegal, you hustle no matter what.
Yeah.
And I that's just who I am.
I think of it more like, though, you look at things from different angles than most people, because you have been exposed to that life, and now, living the life that you live now, you're always just looking at things from different angles, and you see the world in a different way than most people, and that's really, really cool.
I see the gray area.
Yeah.
That a lot of people don't see. I always see the gray area, even when I don't want to. Like, for instance, because I used to break into cars, and I've told you this before, when we walk through a group of cars, I always look inside the car. It's a habit. Not that I'll ever act on it, but it's a habit.
Because you have that mindset, what I've noticed is, like, with me and the kids and our clients, especially the female clients or the clients that come in, wanting to put security on their kids' cars, you're always looking at it from that mindset, of, okay, if I was the perpetrator, this is how I would get into this car, and this is how I'm going to keep you safe.
That's right.
This is how we're going to protect you. And so I feel like I said, it gives you an edge that a lot of people don't have, because now you're kind of using that evil genius for good and not for evil anymore.
I don't know if I call it evil genius, but but yes, I do. I think that way, and I always have. And I think in some aspect that kind of keeps me straight, because I think that way. I always will think that way. I always think of the angles and the way I can make money illegally, but I don't, because I know it's not worth it. In the end, it's not worth what I would lose.
Yes,
I lose everything. And so it's not worth it to me. However, if I can utilize that to keep somebody else from getting hurt or their stuff getting stolen or whatever, I will. I'll put it to good use.
Yeah.
As best I can.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that too, because you just said, you've learned not to take advantage of people and do people dirty, because karma, that comes back to you. And I don't care what your belief system is. You reap what you sow. Karma comes around. Whatever it is, that always comes back to you. And most of the time it's worse. Yeah. So we're going to jump forward a little bit, because by this point, you've come up in the industry, you've worked for a lot of people in the industry. There's no central school for customs. And that's why I think that this industry is so dysregulated, because you can get certifications in certain things, but they really don't hold a lot of water. It's just to say, I've gone to this class with this one company, like JL Audio.
Yeah, and the schools that I have been to, the trainings that I have been to, all you have to do is sit there and listen, and then they give you the certificate at the end of the training. Right. It's like you didn't actually have to prove you know anything.
Exactly.
And if you're not doing that training, it's just like learning another language. If you don't practice that language, you lose it.
Right.
And
every car manufacturer is different. So just because you know about this, installing this one thing, you don't know how to install it on every car.
Well, there are, once you get to a certain level, they're all very similar.
Yeah.
They're all very similar, and you can approach every car very similarly, in my experience. But yes.
I hear you so often, though, with the guys in the shop, and they'll say, well, I installed this on a so-and-so, and you'll go, yeah, but it's a little different in this.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by, unless you just had experience in this industry and you have worked under someone who has that experience and learned from them, there's really no, like for welding, you can go to a welding school and pay a bunch of money and they train you on how to do it. And then you go and apprentice, and then you go and, you put your time in and you work your way up. It's even less regulated in our industry. And so that's kind of how you did it. You cut your teeth in this industry by going in, and one, you hated anyone telling you couldn't do something. You would figure it out. You are such a researcher. You'll read every handbook, every pamphlet. You'll watch every YouTube video. You'll read every forum.
The ironic part is I hate reading.
It's insanity. It's insane.
Unless it interests me.
That's true. Exactly. And so you've learned how to do everything. There's not one part of a vehicle you haven't touched. So at this point, you are working where before the first company? Not Elite, but before Music City Customs.
I worked at several companies. I worked at Electronic Express, installing.
But during the time, this was birthing.
Elite?
No, Music City Customs.
City? Oh, I worked at a company. I worked at two companies. I worked at Auto Pro, which is actually still here.
Mm-hmm.
I actually opened the company with the owner, and he's recently sold it, and somebody else runs it now. And then I had left and went to another company called Harpeth Motorsports, which did custom. They didn't do customizations. They did what they call upfitting. So if you bought like a brand new car and it didn't come with leather, they put leather in it. If you bought a brand new car and it didn't have entertainment in it, like TVs, they put entertainment in it. If it didn't have a sunroof, we put sunroof in it. If it didn't have, like the normal stuff you would get from the dealership,
mm-hmm.
that's what they do. Bed covers, bed liners, shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't customize things.
Gotcha.
But
not the way we customize things.
Correct.
They would upgrade it.
Yeah, they call it upfitting. Okay. And however, when I went to work there, they dipped into it just a little bit, but they realized that it's so hard to regulate. It's so hard to price it. It's hard because every car is so different.
Yeah.
So it's very, very hard to price it correctly.
Yeah.
And so I actually went to that company. I worked there for about 4 months, about 4 months. And I said, listen, at this time, I had a lot of customers I did work for on the side. I've been doing this a long time now, like 10 years. And I said, listen, I have a bunch of customers. I don't have time to get to them. I've got my son is 2 years old. I don't really have a whole lot of time. I can bring them to you guys. Do you guys want me to bring them to you? I didn't want any money for them or anything. I just wanted my customers taken care of. These are guys I've known for years. And they go, no, we don't. We only want to focus on dealership work and stuff like that. We don't want retail work. Okay. Well, then do you mind if I buy parts through you guys? I'll pay the taxes. I'll pay an up fee or whatever. And they were like, yeah, sure, no problem. You don't have to pay an up fee. Just pay the taxes on it. Mm-hmm. Great. So that first month, and so then I would do it at night on my own time or the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
So that first month, I bought more parts from them that first month through them than they did in parts and labor in a month. And so when they looked at the numbers, they were like, you can't do this. And I was like, I asked you guys. I gave you the opportunity. I asked first. I did all the things I was supposed to do. And now you're saying I can't do it. And they said, yeah. And so they fired me for it. But by this time, I had already built up enough client base and I was moving. And me and my ex-business partner at the time had already come up with this idea, had made cards and everything. And we were already going. Yeah. I already had dealerships and stuff that I was doing work
because they encouraged you to do it on the side.
That's right.
So you and Jeff, you get fired and you guys come up with, and this is going to lead into...
No, so I get fired. And that day that I get fired, I got fired that morning. Mm-hmm. Didn't matter. I had cars that I was supposed to work on that evening. And so I just went to work. Right?
Yeah.
And so he worked there for another month before they fired him.
Oh, they fired him for the same thing?
For the same thing because they found out he was coming at night and in the weekends helping me.
Gotcha.
And so they fired him.
Gotcha.
Well, they shut down 4 or 5 months after that. Anyways, they closed. They closed the doors. So
because karma, ladies and gentlemen, you can't do people dirty. And this is like the mecca of karma. This story, I hate that it happened to you, but I love that it happened for you.
So we start that, and where I messed up is I went 50-50 partners. That's where I screwed up. I'll never make that mistake again. But I went 50-50 partners, and we got into it, and we built it fast, big, fast. And about a year into it, we needed capital. And one of our clients came in, and I was talking to him, bullshitting with him, and he goes, well, how much do you need? I said, I really don't know. Like, I don't know, but we really want a bigger building. We only had a 2-car bay. And there was a building that's ironically across the street from us now.
Yeah.
That was available, had been available for a while. And I said, we want that building that's big enough for us. And he goes, okay, let me see what I can do. So he puts it together. Well, he took 51% of the company. That caused us splitting to 27.5% each. Mm-hmm. So he took majority. Well, it's my first business. I don't know no better. Yeah. Mine and his both first business.
Yeah. So Chris takes 51%.
Yeah. Yeah. So he takes 50. He takes 50.
Oh my God, that's so accurate with this guy.
So he takes 51%, right? And so we move into the new building. We get everything situated, and about 6 or 7 months into this, things are going well. We're building big, and we're bringing some big clients.
But you guys made some pretty rookie first-time business owner mistakes. Like there was a big lack of accountability. You guys were kind of like the boys club. Now you took the build seriously because that was your passion, and you guys kind of started having a rift because he wanted to party and act like a big shot, right. And you wanted to double down and really focus on getting.
Well, I was trying to build something for my family. You know, I was trying to build something big. I wanted to build something and be something.
Yeah.
And he was, in my eyes, taking the approach of, well, I own business, you know, I'm a business owner, and, you know, taking it that and trying to be a big shot about it. And like, I didn't really care. I still, to this day, don't really care.
And he would leave.
Know I'm an owner. Like
he would leave the work to you and go have 3 or 4 hour lunches and start drinking. And
not even that. He would have 4 or 5 hour lunches at Twin Peaks drinking.
Yeah.
And then pay for it with the business card.
Yeah. And he was like bringing a bunch of chicks over to the shop and like fucking them on the hood of the cars and in the clients' cars.
It went way beyond that. Way beyond that with Craigslist and all that shit.
Oh, yeah. We'll get to that, what was found afterwards.
But, so anyways, about 6 months into it, we had hired.
And mind you, this guy's married the whole time. You both are married with kids, and he's acting like this, and you're just so frustrated.
Right. So he had 2 kids. So anyways, about 6 months into it, we hire, you know, my buddy Ashley and JT. And these are guys that I grew up with, not grew up with per se, but have worked with, known for years.
Yeah.
Right? So we bring them in. They're very, very skilled at what they do.
Very. Ashley, shout out Ashley. He owns Hangar Unlimited in Gallatin. He's the one that does all of the motor swaps and mechanical work for us. He helped us with the Lincoln, with Jelly's Lincoln.
So, and granted, we're kind of young. We're young. I'm in my 30s and like early 30s, and they're even younger than me. So they're in their late 20s, whatever.
Yeah.
So, we get into this and we're doing things. We're living the dream, right? 6 months into this, we're all there, we're hustling. So I start to get a lot of animosity because I'm showing up at 6 a.m. and everybody else is straggling in at 8, 9 o'clock and p.m. or a.m. Sorry. And then I'm leaving at 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night and they're leaving at 5. And I'm like, what the fuck, guys? Like, I'm not the only one here putting in this work. This is not just my business. Now, Ashley and JT, I understand because they're employees.
Right.
But he wasn't an employee. He was a business partner.
Yeah.
An equal partner, business partner. And so I start saying things, hey, what the hell? Like, you gotta, why I gotta get home, my wife this and my wife that my kids, it was always something, right?
Yeah.
And come to find out, he was taking customers' cars home. And these aren't like Hyundais. These are fucking Lamborghinis and Ferraris. He's driving them home. And I didn't know. Come to find out, we put GPS tracking systems for these customers. We put GPS tracking systems on these cars. And they're GPS tracking his ass. And he's lying to them. Telling them, no, I'm not driving your car, when they can pinpoint it at his house. And he lived in Old Hickory, which was 45, 50 minutes away from us.
See, I didn't know about that part.
And I found this stuff out later on. I didn't know it at that time. But I do remember one case where I jumped in one of the Lambos we had there and drove it just down the street to get it tinted, which was 4 buildings down from us, to get it tinted. And I, step on the brakes and the damn beer can rolls out from underneath the passenger seat.
Oh, wow.
Right. And so, that was one of my final straws. And one day I lost it and I went in there and I said, man, you need to talk. And and they started saying something. I said, you guys shut the fuck up. You have nothing to do with this. And me and him went and got into it. And I grabbed him by his throat and I picked him up and I was like, I'm going to beat your fucking ass. Well, about not even a week later, the business investor comes in and was like, hey, I got some information from him. And we had another guy that worked there that did our books. Mm-hmm. Was a computer guy. Well, somehow or another, we found all this out later. Somehow or another, they worked it up in the books, like went backwards in QuickBooks and worked it up to make it look like I was taking money and buying parts for my own personal cars and things like that. And I wasn't. I did buy some parts for my own personal cars, but me and him did that for each other. That was part of our original deal, is like if the company had money and we wanted something for our cars for demo.
But that was before the investor came in.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so, but they went back and it made it look like I was taking a bunch of money, like thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And I talked to him. I was like, where? I drive the same car I've always driven. There's nothing special on it. Like, I live in the same house I've always lived in for fucking 13 years. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, and he said, well, I got to sit down and have a meeting with them, and then I'll have a meeting with you. And so he sat down and had a meeting with them, and my ex-business partner was a hell of a manipulator. Like, I don't know how he did it, but he could talk anybody into anything.
Yeah, he was a salesman.
He was. And he pulled the wool over JT and Ashley's eyes and the investors' eyes. And just, they believed anything he said. Yeah. What he said was the Bible.
Yeah.
And he had a meeting with him and he said, look, they don't want you back. And I said, okay. I said, listen, I'm going to tell you right now. And this is on the phone. I said, listen, I'm going to tell you right now, you're making the wrong choice. You're picking the wrong person. And he said, okay. And that was October 31st. I'll never forget it because it's Halloween. And so I went on, and I think the 14th of November or something like that, I filed for an LLC for Elite Customs, got my name, bought the website, bought everything. But I was doing work out of people's garages. I was doing work. I did some work for Lee Bryce. I was doing some work out of his garage on his cars. I was doing work for Michael Griffin. I was doing work in his garage out of his house. I did work for another guy out in his garage.
Yeah, because didn't you tell me when a lot of your clients caught wind that you were no longer with Music City that they called you and were like, we don't want him touching our car. And there were a lot of issues that started coming out. Like the
and I
work,
don't blame for him.
Yeah, the work wasn't being done correctly. It was actually dangerous. It could have actually killed people.
Yeah, brakes leaking, brake calipers leaking. They pull off the paint and they were leaking bad. Matter of fact, my buddy Terry at Mercedes, he called me a couple times. Hey man, did you guys? I don't have nothing to do with that. Yeah. And he goes, well, this came from there.
So slowly the clients followed you away.
Right.
And
some of them stayed there for a little while.
Yeah.
Eugene stayed there. Denmark stayed there. People like that stayed there because, again, great salesman. He made it look like I was
We're gonna bleep his name.
Oh, shit.
Jeff. Say that again.
Jeff was a good salesman. He would make it look like I was the problem and everything. And it took about a year for people, for everybody to realize that I wasn't I wasn't that. I was Music City Customs.
Yeah.
You know, for all intents and purposes, I was.
So after you left Music City until the point you got your building, your first building, how long was that?
Oh, just a short couple of months. November 14th, I filed for LLC of Elite Customs. And so I started doing work, right? Brian Poor, he went out and he found me work at his house. He was like, oh yeah, I got this and that, and you can do this and this and that. I mean, I was out there in the cold and coveralls outside in the snow doing work, putting in work, making money. And I got up enough money to get my first building.
Yeah.
Actually.
And it was a single car bay.
No, it fit two cars in there.
Two cars
in there. But it was a 1,200 square foot shop.
Gotcha.
But I borrowed the money from Uncle Mike.
Yeah.
Holly's uncle.
Yeah. Shout out Uncle Mike for believing in you.
It was like $3,000. I borrowed it from him. It was the last month of the security deposit.
Yeah.
So I borrowed that from him and I ended up paying him back a few months later and opened it up. And they were pissed when they found out I opened that up. They were mad as hell. And I found out later that Jeff was nervous.
Of course.
He was nervous. So shortly after I was gone from there, he hired Mike.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike had worked with us at Harpeth. Yeah. So he knew both of us. And of course, Mike didn't like me because of all the things that were said about me.
Yeah.
Now, you know, that I couldn't defend.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't there. So he works there. And then Novia comes into play with the same investor invested into Novia.
Right.
So Novia is now working there in the same building. So he gets to know him. Right. And so then Elite's doing great. I'm about a year into Elite being open.
Yeah.
A little over a year, maybe. And
your shop is beautiful. You've always had the gorgeous epoxy floors.
Well, see, remember it goes back to I know people.
Yeah.
And so when I opened my shop, I called our epoxy guy, and me and him were real cool.
Yeah.
And he was like, I got you. He came and did it for free.
Yeah.
Epoxied my whole floor for free. Took care of it. And then
all the people that went with you were like, oh no, we're not going to let this. Like everybody rallied around you and built you up. And the ones that didn't, I love this part of the story so much because it's kind of like your day.
The ones that didn't got screwed.
Yeah.
You know, some of them got screwed. Denmark, you know, he lost a set of wheels that he went and just sold on Facebook.
Mm.
Yeah, Jeff just sold them on Facebook, and so he didn't get those back. So he ended up coming.
And wheels are expensive.
Yeah, those are factory Range Rover wheels.
Yeah,
and
they can be thousands and thousands of dollars. And depending
then Eugene, he put a deposit down on a Continental, and the parts never got ordered ever. And so he ended up getting his money back, but then coming to me, and then I built the Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
And Eric, same thing. They tried to screw him over, and I built it. And so they started catching wind that I was doing these jobs for these customers, and they were getting nervous and pissed at the same time. And then one day I ran into Rich at another shop. I happened to be down the street at another shop, and Rich happened to show up.
Novia.
Yeah. And so we got to bullshitting, and we were very, very similar.
Yeah.
Very similar. And I said, listen, I got a car I need wrapped. Would you be interested in it? He goes, how much does it pay? I said, I don't know, $2,500. And he goes, I'm down. Because he was a brand new company.
Yeah.
So he comes over and wraps that car in the evenings with me. Wraps it. I pay him. Good to go. Turned out to be a football player. And I said, look, I got another one. I got a Bentley to wrap. He goes, cool, I'm down. And so Jeff finds out about it and is furious.
And you can't do that with your subs. You don't get to control where they work or who they work with.
His business was inside of Music City.
Yeah.
So they were sharing things.
Yeah.
And so he gets pissed off and tells the investor, well, he's over here at Elite doing jobs. And the investor, what would we call him, Chris?
Yeah.
So Chris turns to Novia and goes, is he paying you? And he goes, yeah, as soon as I'm done, he pays me. He goes, make your money. And he tells him, you shut up, because he's making his money. That's his business.
Yeah.
And so we start doing business together. Well, then Chris puts Novia and his wife in charge of the books now.
Right, because she's incredibly intelligent. She's very attention to detail oriented. She's incredible.
And this is towards the end of Music City. And so stuff really starts coming in.
Yeah. Because they don't have a dog in the fight. They're not invested in the company. They're nothing. Like Jess is, and she is a bulldog. Yeah. Like you don't push her around.
So stuff starts popping up, coming up, little things. They start catching the Twin Peaks charges for $500 because all of them were going down there for 2-3 hours and drinking beer and
not Chris.
Things. Not Chris.
Yeah.
No, he was a big business guy. He was always going to Dubai and stuff. Like he was hardly ever there. I only saw him 3-4 times.
Yeah.
So he wasn't there, but all the rest of them were. And so work wasn't getting done and work was getting messed up. And I mean, they were just partying, living it up, living the best life. And the business was paying for it.
Yeah.
Chris was paying for it, And so this stuff starts to come out. Well, even some more stuff came out that was really, really fucked up. But Rich starts telling me some of this. He goes, look, it's closing.
I would feel bad for his wife, but I just don't.
Well, Rich is like, hey, it's closing. They're going to close the business. Chris wants you to come in and see if you want to buy any of it. Mm-hmm. I said, I'm there. And so actually, me and Chuck.
Yeah.
Chuck loaned me some money. And I said, look, I need some of the equipment. He goes, cool, I got you.
Yeah.
And I went and bought their entire wood shop. Matter of fact, the wood shop I have is bought from there. Most of it. And bought the whole wood shop, bought a bunch of bits, bought inventory, bought tools, bought all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I'm there. We're loading. And by this time, Mike works for me.
Yeah.
No, Mike didn't work for me yet.
But when he came and worked for you, and all the story, the details came out.
No, it started to come out because he was at Music City, and me and him started to talk, and he had this chip on his shoulder.
Yeah.
Right? He had this chip on his shoulder, but we talked for a little bit, and Rich was also talking to him. Novia was talking to him and going, I don't know where you're getting this information. He's not like that. Like, he's not those things that you're saying. Like, I'm doing work with him. I'm with this guy for 6-7 hours.
Yeah.
He's not. I don't understand.
Yeah.
And so it starts messing with Mike's head a little bit. And this is what Mike has told me over the years. And so I go in and buy all the stuff, and the investor's there. He shows up. And he goes, hey, you got a minute? Can I talk to you out back? I said, sure, no problem. We walk out back. He sticks his hand out. He goes, I want to shake your hand. He said, you were right. I made the wrong choice. And he said, he took me for $490,000.
Oh, I didn't realize it was that much. Oh my gosh.
He's like, I am sorry. He's like, you tried to warn me and I didn't listen.
Wow.
I said, you made the wrong choice. I told you that and I was right. I was the one that did the work.
Yeah.
He goes, I know. He's like, I'm sorry.
And Elite has been going strong ever since.
10 years.
10 years.
January 1st will be 10 years since I was in my building.
Yeah.
And then after that, now Rich is kind of homeless. He don't have a place, right? So he finds a place, but we're steady doing work together. I'd tear down cars for him so he could wrap them. I'd put them back together, and he'd come wrap cars for me. I'd tear them down. He'd do. So we're doing plenty of business together, right?
Yeah.
And then I reach out to Mike because I had a Ferrari that needed a convertible top. He's the best. Mm-hmm. And I say, hey, Mike, I got this top. And he goes, well, I'll come by and talk to you. And so he comes by, and we go to lunch and we sit down and bullshit and talk. And he goes, I'll do that car for you. So he does that car for me on the side.
Yeah.
I pay him right away. And said, you interested in doing anything else? He said, what else you got? I said, I got a boat that needs some interior stuff fixed. He said, yeah, come do it for you. Prices it out. He does it. I pay him. He never leaves. He was with me for 7 years.
Yeah.
And
Ashley came back and
yeah,
you guys worked.
Yeah, because Ashley left before they shut down. So did JT. They both showed up at my shop, different days, and just came to apologize. Yeah. I'm so sorry. Like, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I was clouded and didn't realize. And so me and Ashley are great friends now. Me and JT are cool. We don't hang out like me and Ashley do, but I mean, we're all still cool now. And so it's funny how it all came full circle, because now he's on an island alone and nobody.
He's not even in the industry anymore. No. The investor, he doesn't touch the industry. Jeff he doesn't even show up to car shows or nothing. Oh no, he can't show his face.
Will not. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's some things, and I made it all in our industry with me being involved with that. And there are times that I'm still ashamed to even be recognized that I was even part of that, because it went so sideways. And most of it, what people don't realize is it went sideways. I was already gone. And
that's part of the reason why I want to set the record straight now, is because I love your story so much, but two, there's so much of your story that's untold, because you are not the type of person that you go and you don't go and justify anything, and you don't try to tell your side of the story. Like, you very much live by the mantra of, let your life speak louder than your words. But at this point, Elite is to, I think, a level of recognition that I want your story out there. I want the truth out there. And we don't have to name legal government names, and we don't have to bash people, although
well,
because I love you, I would like to. But your story is such an incredible, and I've told you this from the day I met you, I believe that you are favored by God. I've watched it happen over and over and over. And I'm telling you, do not touch someone who is favored. You so much remind me of like guys in the Bible, and I'm not here to like preach a sermon or anything. I'm more spiritual than religious, but you just remind me so much of these guys in the Bible that God pulled out of. I mean, David, he was kind of a shitty dude. He was a womanizer, and he was, he was not the greatest guy, but he turned his heart to God, and God used him for really great things. And that's really how I see you. And I've watched it happen over the past, how long have we been together?
7 years.
7 years.
When's our anniversary?
October something. 20.
Oh, there you go. You got it.
There was a lot happening in October, okay?
So, but the ironic part about all of that is that, a lot of people come on and embellish their stories.
Yeah.
But you've heard them from other people.
Oh,
you've heard the same exact.
If anything, you diminish your stories greatly. Like, you could tell so much and you don't. Okay, so we have time for one last story. And this also, I love this one so much. And I can say, right hand to God, God's honest truth. So, Jelly Roll, you kind of got in cool with him. You guys very much came up the same way. I'm sure everybody can kind of see the similarities now, hearing your story. And this is such a small snippet screenshot of your life. Like, the hours and hours of stories and experiences we could tell. And I'll have you back on the podcast to tell some of those. But the day he came in and sat down with you and told you, Bubba, I think I'm going to record a country album.
Oh, shit.
Because
we were standing in the back parking lot.
You would listen to him. You introduced me to him, and I was like, what in the fresh grown hell is this? I had never heard of country rap at all. And you introduced me to Upchurch, who is another client of ours, and walks through the back door like it's nothing. But the day Jelly Roll told you he was committing, like he was going full country.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because I had been listening to Jelly Roll for like 15 years. The first time I ever heard of him, I actually did work on the little tour vans they used to go in.
Yeah.
And it was for a guy named Fat Tommy. And he would hire me to come in. There was like 15 or 20 of those vans, and it was all the country rap guys. and most of them were like nobody, like Cool Whip and stuff like that.
Cool Whip?
Not even making this shit up. Dead ass. Cool Whip and Mercules and stuff like that. I swear to God. But they would have the raps printed, and they were on the sides of these vans, and so they would travel in these vans, but they would sell the merchandise out of the vans, like the mix albums and tapes and CDs and shit like that.
Yeah.
And shirts and so Jelly was on one of them. But so I was doing these vans. I was putting stereos in them and GPS trackers in them. And I would go to Mount Juliet, and there was a big lot where they all sat, and I would put all these in there, right? And they'd pay me or whatever, and I'd do like 20 of them at a time.
And this was how long ago?
Oh, it had to be 15 years ago.
Okay.
Had to be.
So this tracks right along with his career, where he was at.
And so the first time I ever really heard of him, like I had saw that, and then shortly after that, he had an album with Haystack. Well, I was a huge Haystack fan. I loved Haystack from the very beginning. He came out in like 96, I think, on radio in Nashville.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was in the radio. So that was a big deal. He was
in
the radio. And so I followed him because of that, right?
Yeah.
And I always knew who he was. And then one day I'm sitting here eating lunch in the shop, and I get a voicemail. So I listened to the voicemail. And
I remember.
It was like, hey, this is Jelly Roll. I got your phone number from Kyle, and he told me he needed to come see me. I had some stuff done, and I just need it fixed.
Yeah.
And I was like, I hung up the phone, and I was like, fuck, that was fucking Jelly Roll that just called me.
Yeah, your face went totally blank and white, and
Brent was sitting there, and he was like Jelly Roll, the rapper, Jelly Roll? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, are you fucking serious? I was
and
like,
this
absolutely.
is long before he blew up. Like, you were
this
just
like
a fangirl.
Like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
About 4 years ago. And I was like, yeah, Jelly Roll, the rapper. Like, he just called me and left me a voicemail. And he goes, well, fucking call him back. So I go to my office and I call him back. I was like, yeah, come on by. He's like, I'm actually in the area. I'll stop by. I was like, cool, stop by.
No big deal. My butt crack's sweating, but you can come by anytime.
Yeah. So he stops by, and I'm shooting the shit with him. He tells me about his truck, and he had some stuff done in another shop, and he took it back several times and just wasn't happy with it, and with the audio. And so I was like, cool, let's get it in here, and I'll get it fixed for you. He was like, cool.
And you guys hit it off. Y'all ended up talking for like 2 hours, like finding out. You kind of ran with the same crews, grew up in the same area. Yeah.
And so he drops it off. I get it fixed, and he goes. And then we blacked out the upper half too. We did some more upgrades to it.
Yeah.
He was like, dude, it's never sounded like this. It's never sounded this good. And I was like, I'm glad you're happy with it. And he loves it. I've never worked on it again, audio wise.
Right. You don't have to.
No, we rewrapped it, but that was it. But so that introduced it that, and and then he bought the Cadillac, and he was like, look, I just bought this Cadillac, and I want to do it like old dope boy style. Yeah. And I was like, okay, tell me exactly what the hell that means.
Oh no, man. The way he was like, oh, it's a gym, it's really in great shape. And
oh man, he was like, it's perfect. And I was like, damn. So we get it had been repainted and had like,
it was a rust bucket.
The old school cars, when they said 50,000 miles on it, they were usually 150 or 250 because they rolled over. They didn't show the one. And this one had rolled for sure.
A couple times.
Yeah. And it had been repainted for sure. There was overspray everywhere.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, this isn't in good shape. And he was like, well, I already bought it. I bought it from one of my buddies that owns whatever. Yeah. He's like, I want to cut the top off, and I want to make it a dope boy.
And this is where your West Coast influence comes in, because this is what you knew. You knew lowriders. You knew the dope boy cars. You knew
I knew what he wanted.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, cool. And cutting the top off was a lot more challenging.
Yeah, because you have to reinforce it and
well, it's not even that.
In.
This particular Eldorado is a front wheel drive car. Mm-hmm. So it's not a rear wheel drive like all the other fucking ones. Mm-hmm. Only the Eldorado is front wheel drive.
Yeah.
And so he bought a front wheel drive car, which has less stiffening. It doesn't have a frame.
Yeah.
So it's a unibody. And so you have to go in and stiffen everything.
Yeah.
The ironic part is they made the fucking Eldorado in a convertible. But this one was not a convertible. It was a hardtop that he wanted to make.
It's okay. It's all right. You guys made it happen. And it was iconic because this turned out to be the car that he and Bunny drove up the red carpet in. First CMA show.
First CMAs.
And it was his first year Like, I mean,
popping
he
off, yeah.
blew the hell
I think he
up.
won some awards that night.
He did.
So yeah, it was really cool. And shortly after we worked on his truck, we worked on Bunny. He bought Bunny G-Wagon.
Yeah.
Then we built the G-Wagon, the red chrome G-Wagon.
Yeah.
And
that was really cool bringing in, because she, she's an icon in her own right. And so for her to come and dip her toe in the custom industry and learn what it's all about, now she's full in. Like, she's customizing left, right, and center. But to see her light up and like get a taste of that was really cool to watch.
Yeah,
and you can actually see that on her YouTube channel. She did a vlog about her G-Wagon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when we did the red.
Oh, the red one.
Yeah. And so you can see that whole process, but you're going to see pretty soon we redid her G-Wagon, and we're working on another one of her vehicles.
Yeah.
So you'll see all of that on her pages too, but the day he told you he was going country.
Yeah, so he was telling me about the Cadillac, and we got it here, and we were outside in the parking lot talking about it, and I was like, so what's your next move? And he goes, man, he said, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but I'm producing a country album. And I was like, what? I'm sorry? And he was like, yeah, I'm making a country album. I was like, dude, like, what?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, for sure. And we started bullshitting about it. I was like, well, that's awesome, man. I hope the best for you. And it just struck me as weird. And I remember coming back and telling you, Joe told me he's making a country album.
Yeah.
And you were like, what?
Yeah.
Because it just didn't make sense.
When we went back and really listened to his music, because I think we were like everybody else at first. We were like, what the fuck is he thinking?
How do I take this?
Yeah, and then we went back and really listened. But all of the times that he had sang on his music and his writing style, and we were like, he's going to be unstoppable. He has so much soul. He has so much pain to, write about.
So much to say.
Yeah, and he's such a wordsmith.
Absolutely.
And the rest is history. Like,
the funny part, we were standing there talking about that, and then Kevin Byron shows up from the Titans. I was like, you know any Titans players? And he was like, no, not really. And I was like, well, that's Kevin Byron. And so they hit it off really cool, and they became pretty cool. And we all sat there and bullshitted. It was a pretty cool moment.
Yeah, you never know who you're gonna see here at Elite. And I think, going back to what you were talking about in the beginning, how everybody just wants to be made to feel like a person, like a regular person. And so when they come in, like Kane Brown was one of the most enjoyable people. He's so shy and so quiet, down to earth, and
very nice guy though.
Super, super nice guy. We have rarely had bad.
So was Upchurch. Upchurch is cool as hell. We built several cars for him, and very cool guy.
He's super cool. We rarely ever have bad experiences, and usually they take themselves out. They just don't come back. But we, our guys are taught not to gawk over anyone who walks in, and not to act out of sorts. You don't ask for, you don't ask for a picture or anything like that. Afterwards, if they want to bring stuff back in for our guys, they do. With most of the time, without us asking, they'll bring signed hats and posters or whatever.
Or they get to a point where they go around and talk to the guys. Specifically, they go and say hi to them, and then it becomes now they're cool with everybody. Now it's not that big of a deal. Right. Because our guys have ran into those guys outside of the shop, and they know exactly who they are. Yeah. And they're cool with it. So, and that's really cool, because I think it's because they're treated normal.
Yes, exactly.
They're just treated like normal.
Because they are normal. They just have a talent that has taken them places that, you and I may never go. And so to listen to their stories, it's really cool. Okay, so wrapping this up, going into 2025, are there any artists or celebrities that you would love to work on their vehicles or build something for them? Because I know I can name for sure 2 right now.
Well, we're somewhat connected with Brantley Gilbert a little bit, through Corey and Elaine. But I'd love to build something for Brantley. We've been in his music videos, but we've never actually done a build for him. Yeah. I'd love to build something for Cody Johnson. Would be awesome.
Could you imagine?
That'd be so cool.
A truck for Cody Johnson.
So cool. That'd be so cool. And then I'd love to
with all the tooled leather.
I'd love to build one for who was the other guy? There was one more guy that I wanted to do some work for recently. I'd love to build something for The Rock. That'd be awesome. Or just to even meet The Rock would be really cool. And but no, there's another artist that's out here that's becoming. Oh, Post Malone.
Oh yeah.
I'd love to build something because I know my understanding is that he's got a place out here now, and I'd love to do something. He's really into cars, big time, and I know people that are connected to him in Utah, through the Bentley dealership and stuff. But I'd love to build something.
Why don't you make my husband's dreams come true and just come back? I would.
We did just build one for Nate Bagetzi.
Oh yeah, he was cool.
He's cool as shit. He's a really, really nice guy.
And
he's really
now
nice.
I would love to see more female artists come in and spread their creative wings in that way. I think Lainey Wilson would be just the fucking coolest to work on anything for her.
That would be cool.
And then Russ. I think Russ would be one of those guys that would think outside of the box and really let us do some just fucking. And can you imagine like the sound system he'd have us put in whatever he drives?
We did do some work for Dolly Parton.
We did.
Years and years and years ago.
We did get her Maybach, but
some of these people we don't get to actually meet
per
se, but we know that their cars we meet them through.
I think Luke Bryan and his whole team have made, outside of Jelly and Bunny, have been the coolest and have become the most like family with us. Their team, the stuff we get to work on for them.
We built several cars for them. I've never met Luke. We met I met Caroline once.
Yeah.
And then but Robert calls me and we take care of it for him. Him, his sons, whatever. We would take care of it for him.
Well, Rich, thanks so much for coming on my podcast.
Thanks, babe.
I can't say that you're going to get paid for this one, but I won't give you a hard time.
I'll get paid.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to have you back on and tell some more of these stories, but I'm glad that you were willing to open up and tell a little bit more about your side of things and clear the air, and I appreciate you.
You're welcome, baby.
Thanks for being my first guest.
Thanks for having me.
I love you.
I love you.